And now I have an opportunity to introduce our speaker, who is Dr. Tara Sui-Nachporn, and she's an assistant professor in the Human Communication Studies Department at Cal State Fullerton. Her teaching and research areas are interpersonal, relational, and sexual communication, merging with culture and technology. She is a passionate educator, and when she's not teaching, she gives relational and sexual communication advice on her Instagram page and other news media outlets such as Cosmopolitan, Women's Health Magazine, Tusk Magazine, and the Orange County Register. So please welcome Dr. Tara Sui-Nachporn, and I hope I said that fairly correctly.
Fairly correctly. Thank you so much for the introduction, Janice. Hi, everyone. How's it going? I'd like to encourage the video on if you could. It would be a little bit more interactive so that we're speaking to each other semi face-to-face. I am excited for this session. There will be a lot of participation. That will be fun. My goal for this session is so that we learn about mindful intercultural interactions for personal relationships in a more lighthearted, playful, and fun way instead of a critical manner, because I'm sure there are other sessions already in this particular series that are echoing those terms. So let's get started today. I see we have a good amount of people for us to get started with our first activity. So hi everyone again. I'd like to welcome you to this session for Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. This session is titled Mindful Intercultural Communication for Personal Relationships. And I'm Dr. Tara. I'm from the Department of Human Communication Studies. I am personally from Thailand. So every interaction I have here in the US is intercultural interaction for me. So that's my first, that's my street credibility. My academic credibility, my PhD is particularly in interpersonal and intercultural communication, particularly in the context of close relationships, such as friendships, romantic relationships, and family. So without further ado, the first activity is the cultural bingo. And I am going to stop share screen for a little bit. If you could please unmute and we shall do this activity together. So this is our whole, I was gonna say class. This is our whole class bingo. So let's see if we can fill out either vertical, horizontal, or maybe all of them. Let's get to know each other a little bit, and as you are able to tell me which one you represents you, then I will circle it, and I want you to tell us a little bit about that. So who wants to go for has visited another country?
I think many of our OLLI members, they're so well traveled. I would say most of them have visited another country, but I could be wrong.
I believe so. I see Mary's thumb. So Mary, what has been your favorite country visited?
I'd say Australia.
Wonderful. Awesome. We're done with first. Who here speaks another language fluently? Anyone?
Oh.
Does not fit under fluent.
I will take that. Was it you, Laureen?
Yes, I'm working on Spanish, but that's not anywhere near fluent.
Wonderful. Hola, ¿cómo estás? That's how much I know.
Muy bien, gracias. Et tú?
Awesome. We're good to go here on a roll. Who has friends or family living in another country? Awesome. All right. Do I see Other hands here. Again, can you please raise your hand if you do have family living in another country? Lydia,
What?
what country?
Physical or mechanical?
I have nieces and nephews in China because
Wonderful.
my oldest sister never came to this country when my mother and my other siblings did. So she stayed back in China. So I met her once, and I met her and talked to her children a couple occasions. And
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, so we're 3 down. Who here can name the town of their grandparents' birth? Laureen?
Lendam, Denmark.
Wow. I think it's incredible that you know that. I am a little ashamed that I don't know mine.
Genealogy is one of my hobbies. So.
Oh, nice. I did that 23andMe, so I know where I'm from originally. Although I'm from Thailand, it says that I'm 100% Chinese.
Mm.
Who here enjoys music in a foreign language? Anybody?
Yep, I do, but I
Yes.
can't find, there's my hand.
Sue, what language do you enjoy the music in?
Well, pretty basic. I like French and I like Italian. Oh, and Spanish.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
One of my favorite Spotify radio is the Italian Cafe playlist. It's very pleasant. Thank you all. We're done with that, but we're ambitious group of people, so we're gonna keep going.
Liz Lincoln has her hand raised.
Yes.
For the last question, do you think you want to go on, or
Liz, take off your mute and speak.
Well, I adore opera, so I like a lot of language. And my first language was French, so I enjoy hearing French often.
That's amazing. I would have to look up French language opera. It sounds wonderful. All right. We're ambitious group of people, so we're going to keep going here. Can someone name 2 countries in Africa?
Yeah,
Seeing
Kenya, Ethiopia, or
Awesome. Thank you. I'm seeing Betty's hand. Do you have other countries?
Sudan, Egypt.
Awesome. All right. So we shall keep going. So we'll have one participant for one question, and then if you can unraise the hand, and then we'll move forward with other boxes. Can someone share a recent current event from another country? I see Mary's hand.
Oh, I'm concerned about what's going on in Myanmar. I have a brother-in-law from that country.
I heard. Are you talking about the conflict between the government and the opposition?
Yes, the military took over the government. Yes.
Yes, I heard about that because Myanmar is my neighbor.
Oh.
Because I'm from Thailand. I saw, okay, has had their first or last name mispronounced. That's me for sure. But Laureen, how have people pronounced your last name?
My current last name, Primer. I was married to an Ukrainian, so my ex's last name is difficult.
Is what?
Is difficult.
Oh, yeah.
Twaniak.
I think I understand you. Up next, has had, oh wait, can name 4 world regions.
that might need a little interpretation in terms of
Religions.
I think just can name 4 world religions.
religion?
Anthony.
Islam, Christianity, Judaism. Somebody help me out with another one.
Buddhism.
Buddhism.
Muslim? No, Muslim.
Got it.
Awesome job, team.
Mhm.
Up next is who is dating or close friends with someone from another culture?
Dating?
Dating? Anybody? Someone from another culture, raise your hand. I'm seeing
Liz.
Liz, where's your partner from?
Well, I was married to a Hawaiian for 43 years until he passed, and that was a very different culture from me.
Yes, yes, Hawaiian, the Islander culture. Hawaiian culture has so much nuances and the emphasis of family. I'm interested in hearing more about all of you throughout our discussion questions in today's lecture, but let's do, not lecture, workshop. Sorry, I'm a professor. I always say lecture. All right, we shall do, let's do a vertical. Who here has been to a bat mitzvah? I have not.
No, I've been to a bris.
Betty?
I dated a Jewish guy once and I went to his sister's bat mitzvah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. All right, next is who knows a dance style from another country?
Style.
Sue, what style is it?
Well, in my younger day, we did the folklorico, and then of course the Havana Gila with the Jewish dance.
Wow, that's awesome. I think I saw also Liz's hand. What dance was it?
I learned the Argentinian tango.
I heard that that's sexy.
Yeah, very. Hard to learn too.
Awesome. What about you, Laureen? You had your hand up?
Salsa.
Nice. All right. So we have a spicy group of people. Is anyone here wearing something that you bought outside the US?
Oh,
Ordered from outside the US or bought?
Betty?
so this scarf I'm wearing, I bought it in China, but it's actually from Tibet.
Wonderful. And Liz?
Well, I'm not wearing it now, but a beret from Paris.
Wonderful. That's
That was
awesome.
there.
Okay. We have accomplished both the horizontal bingo and the vertical bingo. Thank you so much for participation, for your participation. Again, it's a workshop style class, so it is as fun as you want to participate. So please do speak up and participate, and please share your experiences, because you know I am from abroad and I do have my own personal experiences, but I think as a collective, we have so much diversity and experiences to share. So let's get started with the explanation portion. So we did our cultural bingo and that was awesome. Thank you for participating. So today's agenda is understanding what is mindful intercultural communication, why is it important, and then I'm going to cover the mindful intercultural communication model. This is a very renowned model in our field, the human communication studies field. It was actually created by one of our own professors in the human communication department at Cal State Fullerton, Dr. Stella Ting Toomey. She is a well-known intercultural scholar. So let's get started with what is intercultural communication. For the longest time, scholars in social sciences have studied what we call interracial communication, interracial interaction, interracial marriage. Because the United States has a long-standing kind of this conflict between black and white, and now then it used to be the Asian and white, because if you look at historical pictures and then you see, like, for example, no Japs here, or any other terms that represented the conflict during the time. But as you can see, it kind of moved based on what is happening in the world between interracial interactions of people. So it used to be Asian and white in the US, and then it became black and white, and then it became after 9/11, it's heavily focused on Muslim people, people from the Middle East, and then recently with our situations with Black Lives Matter, as well as Asian hate. So it's kind of this cycle where there's always a little tension going on, be it big or small, between people of different race. However, scholars have stopped using interracial communication for a while now, because we believe that even though people of the same race but different cultural background can still have conflict and have that misunderstanding going on because due to the different cultural background. For example, I am Asian and that's my race, right? So based on the interracial communication model, there shouldn't be any misunderstandings between me and all the other Asians out there because we are the same race. However, scholars have now debunked that long time ago that that is not true. Even though you are the same race, because you're different cultural backgrounds and very different, customs, values, and beliefs that can come in between and create misunderstandings. So the more inclusive term, or the more accurate term, should be intercultural communication. Again, two people that are white as their race can have cultural misunderstandings if one of them is from Italy and the other one is from Norway, right? So intercultural communication is a term that we use now. So intercultural communication is communication with people from different cultures, regardless of their race. So again, can be same race, but different cultures. This can include, but not limited to, different racial backgrounds, nationalities, ethnic backgrounds. It also includes different religion, because you can be the same ethnic background but different religion, and that can be a cause of conflict as well. Actually, as the one of you mentioned about Myanmar and what has been kind of going on in the background there, that's not really taking the center stage of the world news, is the cleansing of Muslims in Myanmar. And even though they're all Myanmar people, which is the same ethnic background, but they're different religion, and there's conflict there. Betty?
What about socioeconomic backgrounds? That seems to have a lot of differences too.
Yes, you're correct. The socioeconomic backgrounds, be it, like a different, let's say you're on a lower economic background versus the upper to upper middle ethnic background, there's always going to be differences in understanding how to interact with other people in close relationships, and even view of marriage. One of the chapters I teach in my class, which is on relationships, is marriage. And perhaps people that are from lower economic class, they don't think too much about, oh, we're gonna spend, we're gonna have this, we're gonna have that at our wedding, we're gonna invite 500 people, we're gonna get this hotel venue. So there's always gonna be differences when it comes to people of different cultural background. And as you know by now, we're all such nuanced people. We have a lot of identities. So mix those in together: the racial background, the nationality, the ethnic background, the socioeconomic background, the religious background, and other things, right? Mix all of that together. Of course, there will be room for conflict and misunderstanding, but this class, we're going to talk about mindful intercultural communication, and that is the key for having peaceful relationships with one another. So, what is mindful communication? It is communication based on mindfulness principles. Communication based on mindfulness principles. There are 4 different principles that we're going to talk about. Professor Langner at Harvard is one of the most renowned professors in the United States that studies mindfulness, that brought the concept of mindfulness from the East to the West. She talks about how, you can make mindfulness very complicated or very simple. Today, we're talking about the simple 4 tenets of mindful communication. The very first thing to consider is that it's intentional. It's intentional, which is the opposite of mindlessness, right? If you catch yourself just reacting to things mindlessly, you may have said things that are offensive to others, right? But mindful communication is the opposite of that. It's considering your intent, considering being more intentional. So it's the opposite of being mindless and just reacting with words. The second tenet is being fully present. Being fully present. If you do have a friend, a family member, or your romantic partner who's from another culture who is experiencing a difficulty and is, telling you about the experience, being fully present not only validate their experience and show that you do understand that they have a different human experience than you, it strengthens the romantic relationship or that close relationship that you have. For example, if your children come to you and explain to you the problem they have, when you show them full attention, it shows that you respect that their problems is real for them, even though perhaps for you, you assess it differently. The third mindful communication tenet is remaining open and non-judgmental. As a part of my job, I organize what is called the Civil Dialogue Forums every year. And at Civil Dialogue Forum, we talk a lot about very controversial topics. The last topic that I conducted this event was on the election, before the election occurred. And of course, the main thing that I asked people to do was to stay open and non-judgmental. It is very difficult because you know what? Judgment has bad terms, has bad connotation or bad meaning, when in fact it's mere human behavior. We all judge in 3 seconds. We meet someone new, we judge in 3 seconds, right? So that's just human processes. So the word judgment is just what we do. However, is it like innocent judgment or open-ended judgment, that's a different case. Remaining open and non-judgmental would be a difficult task that we all should try to be aware of and take it slow before we react to something. Lastly, is relating to others with compassion. Sometimes when you interact with people that may look extremely different from you, you may feel, wow, like we have nothing in common. When in fact, that's not true, right? We're all humans. We have basic desires and needs based on the Maslow psychological hierarchy of needs. We want love, we want understanding, we want good families, we want to feel supported. I think that is just basic human wants and needs. So when we're relating to others, can we relate on a basic level rather than, oh, she or he is, they're from this culture, they don't understand me, or they don't understand how we roll. Perhaps they do. Perhaps they also understand how important family is to your culture. And perhaps there's a way to connect with one another that way. We are up next. We're going to have a little activity after this slide. So up next is, why is talking about intercultural communication important? The very first thing is, according to the Census Bureau, interracial marriages have gone up significantly since the 70s. So 1967 was when it was legalized. And since the 70s, the percentage just kept doubling. So in the 70s, it used to be 3%. And again, this was conducted by Census Bureau on interracial marriage. So this has to be different race, not even considering intercultural. So if you can assume, the number is a lot higher interculturally. So interracial marriage in the 70s was 3%. In the 80s, more than double, it was 7%. And then in the 90s, it became 12%. And 2005 was 17%. 2015 was 17%. And this is interracial marriage. So I'm assuming intercultural is a lot higher. But if you just think of the basis of 17% of 300 million people, that's millions of people that are in interracial marriages, that are producing children of merged cultures, that will, generation after generation, carrying on these very complex understanding of customs and culture and history, long history. So of course, it's inevitable. According to Pew Research Center, by 2065, the US population will not have any single ethnic or racial majorities. So safe to say we'll all be beige. 2065 is a while from now, but in the next few generations, we'll see that as a lot more common as people that are mixed race. So my point being, intercultural relationships are inevitable. You all already have friends and family that are different culture. So it is already going on. All right. We are going to do a little questionnaire. This questionnaire is called Intercultural Communication Apprehension. Before explaining it, I don't want to taint you with any information about it. So I'm going to not say anything. I want you to know that when I tell you the question, there's going to be 7 questions. So if you have your phone with you or a piece of paper, please write down from 1 to 7. There will be 7 questions in which I will read to you. And I want you to respond from 1 to 5. 1 is strongly disagree. 2, disagree. So as you see on the screen, 1 is strongly disagree, and 5 is strongly agree. So 2 is disagree. 3 is neutral. 4 is agree, and then 5 strongly agree. So please respond to the statements I'm about to read to you from 1 to 5. 5 strongly agree, 1 strongly disagree. And after we do the 7 questions, you will do a little calculations and you will place in the low, moderate, or high, in which I will explain to you what it means. So let's get started. So there will be 7 questions. First one, I am tense and nervous while interacting with people from different cultures. I am tense and nervous while interacting with people from different cultures. Respond from 1 to 5. 1 is strongly disagree to the statement and 5 strongly agree to the statement. 3 is neutral. So that was the first statement. Number 2, engaging in a group discussion with people from different cultures makes me nervous. Engaging in a group discussion with people from different cultures makes me nervous. 1 to 5. Number 3, while participating in a conversation with a person from a different culture, I get nervous. While participating in a conversation with a person from a different culture, I get nervous. Number 4, ordinarily, I am very tense and nervous in a conversation with person from a different culture. Ordinarily, I am very tense and nervous in a conversation with people from a different culture. Number 5, I am afraid to speak up in conversations with people from different culture. I am afraid to speak up in conversations with the people from different culture. Number 6, my thoughts become confused and jumbled when talking to someone of other culture than mine. My thoughts become confused and jumbled when talking to someone of different culture than mine. And number 7, communicating with people from different cultures makes me feel uncomfortable. Communicating with people from different cultures make me feel uncomfortable. All right. So we have just completed the questionnaire that had 7 different statements. You have scored yourself from 1 to 5 for each statement. Now I'd like you to add it up. Add up all the scores. And if you're comfortable, share it in chat. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. So I'm seeing that the scores range in our group from 7 to 22. This questionnaire was on intercultural communication apprehension, which is that slight anxious or nervous feeling when communicating with people of different cultural background from you. The lower your score is, the lower the anxiety you have. The higher your score is, the higher you feel a little bit more with that anxiety when communicating or interacting with a group of people of other cultures. It ranges from 35 being the highest and 7 being the lowest. So Rana is 7, so that's the lowest possible anxiety. It means you have 0 anxiety when it comes to interacting with people of any culture. I score moderate, and I think it's because I did not grow up with a lot of diversity. I grew up in Thailand, everyone's Asian. So when I first moved here, I'm not gonna lie, I was anxious interacting with people that looked different from me, and I didn't speak fluent English. So it was difficult. I think that some of you that score really low, I assume that you have had a lot of diversity in your life. According to intergroup contact theory, which is a famous theory in psychology, the more diverse people around you are as you grow up and as you live your life, the less anxiety you have about communicating with people of every race or every culture. I see that we don't have any high anxiety around here. So I think this group is pretty good with interacting with people of different cultures from you. I see some moderates. I am a moderate as well. And I see low. Do you feel it reflects you?
So Tara, I'm wondering, this is Janice, if the lower scores reflect somewhat to our age, and that we've experienced more than if you had asked your students the same questions.
Oh, that is so true. It must be a little bit more generational thing with life experience. I do the same quiz with my students, and most of them score moderate, and some of them score high.
I think also it has to do with personality too, because if you're a quieter person like I am, you see the world differently from someone who's very outgoing and doesn't care what anyone thinks, and they'll just say it.
That is so true, Lydia, because there's a study that looks at correlations between extroversion and introversion and how much people experience communication anxiety. And of course, people that are more introverted score a little bit higher in anxiety regardless of with people from any culture. So that's a great point. Liz?
Yes, I have a question. My score is a 12, and I had trouble putting it in the chat. But anyway, my anxiety rises when the accent is so thick that I don't really understand what they're saying. And I don't want to insult them by assuming they're saying this and they're saying that. And that's about the only time I have anxieties, is when the verbal communication is not clear enough for me to partake and be comfortable.
Oh, that's such a great point, and good plug for me. There's another academic term called situational communication anxiety. And Liz, what you just said was situational, right? Because even if you see it's other people from many different race, to you, you don't care. You have no anxiety unless you don't understand the verbal communication. So yes, there's such thing as situational communication anxiety, and sometimes that arises.
Okay.
Thank you. Other questions before we move forward? Anyone else want to talk about their score? There will be more quizzes coming. All right, so let's continue on. So we talked about intercultural communication apprehension, and we did a little questionnaire. Up next is the mindful intercultural communication model. I am going to go through a few concepts only. It's a very extensive model. Our class actually spends half the semester talking about all these concepts in depth, but I am going to talk about a couple of them based on factors. So the first factor is the knowledge factor. The second factor is a motivational factor. And then third factor is the skill factor. Let's talk about different factors what goes in it. What this model talks about is if we're educated on these factors, we're able to engage in mindful intercultural communication appropriately and effectively, in which it satisfies both parties. The outcome is the other person being understood, respected, and supported. So it is the best for good relationships. That's why we teach this model. Since we already talked about how intercultural relationships are really inevitable. All of us are already in one of some sort, maybe a good friend, a romantic partner, or family. So how do we do better in communicating, even though there's various different beliefs and values and all these things that are attached to being different culture? So let's talk about the first factor. First factor is the knowledge factor. And you're all here, so I believe that you're all good on the knowledge factor. You're learners, you're lifelong learners, and you believe in continuing education. So I'm pretty sure as I talk about these concepts, many of you will already know the concepts and probably already apply it in your personal relationships. But let's talk about these different knowledge factors. The first is understanding different cultural values. Understanding different cultural values. The particular markers that I'm talking about today is collectivistic versus individualistic cultures. Collectivistic versus individualistic culture. Has anyone heard of these terms?
No.
All right, thank you. So collectivistic cultures emphasize the group, the family, the collective. So collectivistic cultures, people from collectivistic cultures care about what their family thinks for their personal choices. A lot of, not all, but a lot of Asian cultures are like that, collectivistic. Parents have high involvement in children's lives, and children, they consult with their parents before making personal choices, even as adults. I'm from Thailand and we're highly collectivistic. Um, I concur with the textbook. I do ask my parents for their, I consult them with a lot of things. Even, I'm dating this person, I tell them, ask them what they think. I care a lot about what they think. Collectivistic cultures can also be some Latin cultures. This can be demonstrated through intergenerational homes. Intergenerational homes, because we want to be in a collective. You will be able to see people that are from collectivistic cultures living in multi-generation homes. So children, parents, grandparents, grandchildren, if you're able to afford a big home, then we'll all be living together. I told my husband that, as soon as I get pregnant, my mom will want to come here. She will want to live with us and take care of my baby because that's just how we do it. I grew up having my grandmother raised me. My mother worked a lot. So it's just in our culture that we live in multi-generational homes, in a collective. There's always pros and cons. A lot of pros is that you always have the support of your family. So it feels very secure as an adult. You may see, children that are adults now, perhaps still consulting their parents, still perhaps asking for money or any other practices that are common in collectivistic cultures. The cons, so the pro is that it's a collective. You always feel supported. You always feel good. There's always that family unit. The cons can be that, you don't feel as ambitious because you were always supported. So if you think about your children or grandchildren, the culture speaks for itself, because you're raised that way. It's so ingrained. Sometimes you don't shoot your goals as high because it's safe and secure at home. So the lack of ambition might be a little bit of a negative byproduct. The individualistic cultures have no problem with being ambitious. Because, oh, I'm 16 or I'm 18, I'm moving out. In a high collective culture, you never see people 18 years old moving out. Various countries, like in China, for example, a lot of my friends are Chinese. They live with their parents until they have children and they still live together because it's so common. In America or in the United States, the majority view is that the culture is individualistic. Individualistic cultures emphasizes happiness, individual happiness, and independence, and striving independently. So individual achievement is what you strive for in individualistic cultures. Majority white Caucasian homes in the US are subscribed under individualistic cultures. So it's common to turn 18 and want to move out. Because again, you want to be independent. You want to start striving on your own. You want to have your own space. So it's clear that the pros is there's a lot of ambition that has to be cultivated because you feel like you're an independent person outside of your family unit. But the cons can be that lack of connection with family. The cons can be the lack of connection with family. I have visited my mother-in-law who lives in like a 55 plus housing community. So she bought this house and it's in a huge community in Laguna Hills. You perhaps have heard of it. So every time I go visit, she has lots of friends that they do like different sports, dancing classes. And I hear sometimes my mother-in-law's friends saying, "Oh, I haven't heard from my son for months." I think that is a lot more common in individualistic cultures than collectivistic. In collectivistic cultures where it's ingrained to call your mom, be scared, call your mom. In individualistic culture, you tend to want to strive independently and succeed. So you may forget or don't place emphasis on family as much, your parents. So as you can see, there's always pros and cons. There's no better or worse. It just is. Betty.
Yeah, you mentioned these things as cultures. I feel like this exists within my own family with my siblings, even though we all grew up in the same household and we probably have similar cultures, but our children don't have similar cultures to, to their cousins. Does that make sense?
Yes, that is actually an extremely great point because there's such thing as acculturation. I'm so in the United States, obviously, like everyone based on how many generations back are immigrants. Whatever your ancestors brought with them is their original culture. But there's a concept called acculturation in which you acculturate it into the majority view here. The majority race in the US is white, and it comes with individualistic tendencies. So if you have acculturated independently acculturated into a more individualistic culture, then you will raise your children to be individualistic, not based on your race, but based on how much you have acculturated. But some people don't acculturate and they keep their original culture, some to the point where they don't even speak the language here because they only keep their culture, customs, language, everything. Then they would keep that same collectivistic tendencies. So yes, with children nowadays, like the generation that is millennials, millennial generation and Generation Z, which is the one younger than millennials, they all have their own thing because it depends on how much their parents acculturated or not. So yes, totally makes sense that you say, their cousins, they're so different, depending on you guys and perhaps even your parents. All right, so that was cultural values. Up next, we have verbal and nonverbal communication. Different cultures have different values on how much they should be assertive in their verbal communication. For example, Latin cultures tend to have low context communication, meaning there's a lot of verbal assertiveness. I'm going to say what I think. So low context culture just means a lot of straightforward verbal communication. The majority race in the US is white Caucasian. They also subscribe to low context. High context culture means a lot of nonverbal and reading the room and less verbal straightforwardness. So less verbal assertiveness, but more nonverbal, body language, facial expression. There's a movie that is actually pretty famous in the US called the Joy Luck Club. Have you heard of it?
Yes.
Yes. So in this movie, there was a scene where the white boyfriend came home to the Asian girlfriend's home to meet the family. The mom cooked, and while the boyfriend was not her favorite, she did not verbally say anything. It was a lot of reading the room and, didn't you feel that I don't like him? There was also a time where he poured soy sauce into a dish that she cooked that was supposed to be the best dish she has ever cooked. And he poured soy sauce all over because she was saying, oh no, it's not that good, because in some Asian cultures that is seen as modesty. He poured soy sauce all over because he thinks it's a solution. Oh, it's not salty enough, here's soy sauce. So to him, being straightforward, just verbally communicate is fine. But for her, it's reading the room. She didn't mean that it doesn't taste good. It tastes amazing. It's just to show modesty. So there's bound to be misunderstandings and conflict right here, right? For people that just say whatever that comes to their mind directly, it's pretty easy to be like, oh, okay, that's what they meant. Just interpret it directly. But there's a lot of high context cultures out there that don't speak, verbally directly. You have to read the room, read their face, read the body language. And many, many cultures subscribe to that. So that's verbal, nonverbal communication. Relationship development is also different based on people of different cultures. In India, it's common to have never met your partner, romantic partner, get arranged, meet, two families meet, and you just get married. Right? So relationship development there is very official. Two families are heavily involved. But relationship development here, there's such a word as elopement on like wedding.com. Here's a way to elope. Pay $500, have a wedding on the beach. An Indian mother would cry if their son or daughter eloped, right? Versus perhaps a Caucasian mother is like, oh, that sounds like fun. You do you, as long as you guys are happy. So culturally, it's different. As you can see, it's tied to cultural values. The collective, like Indian culture, the whole families, they want to be involved. They want to help make a decision. The individualistic culture, like a lot of white families here, it's individual happiness. So yeah, you do you elope, go ahead. Las Vegas, go ahead. Am I happy about it? No, but your happiness is yours. There's a theory called social penetration theory. Social penetration theory that talks about how people develop close relationships. And in this theory, we talk about how there isn't one universal way we all develop personal relationship. It depends heavily on the culture. Some people take it slow. When I teach my sexual communication class, I talk a lot about casual sex relationships and how in some cultures it's not common at all, versus in other cultures it's really common. Because the way people view relationship development there can be different. Now, I'm not going to ask you to share if you've had casual sex. Although you can if you want to. But I do want to point out that in this generation, when we do teach sexual education, we teach that casual sex is just an activity. If it brings you fun, pleasure, and happiness, as long as you're safe and consensual, it's completely fine. So as you can see, even in sex ed here, it is leaning towards individualism. And lastly is conflict management. The American, based on what we know in research, Black culture and white culture tend to be more dominant conflict management style, versus Asians tend to be more avoidant, versus Islanders tend to be more compromising. But this also depends on gender. Because Islander, for example, if you're a man, if you're males, you're not supposed to compromise based on cultural values. And I think one of you said you were married to an Islander person for a long time. You may have some experience in that. All in all, compromising, of course, yields an easier outcome, right? Easier to compromise and just come to a solution. However, just because you're dominant conflict management style or avoidant, it doesn't mean that it's bad. It's just a style. You have to work together. For example, an avoidant person can tell the dominant person that, you're overwhelmed by their extreme assertiveness, and you can perhaps both step back and talk with a little bit less emotions. Or the dominant person can say to the avoidant person, like, hey, can you please just speak your mind? Is it okay? Can you, either maybe if you're not uncomfortable, maybe write me a letter or text me, email me, like what has happened? Can you outline how you feel about our conflict? So dominant person can always help encourage avoidant person to speak up. The avoidant person can communicate their being overwhelmed, or if it's too much in that situation, to the dominant person. Of course, hopefully you can at the end compromise. Next, we'll have a quick discussion about cultural misunderstandings. Have you ever experienced cultural misunderstandings? And what happened? Anyone has experienced cultural misunderstandings? I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. Yes, Betty. Oh, you're muted.
One of the things I did in my former job was to deal with our customers from the Middle East. And the first group that came over, they were single and it wasn't as complicated. And another group came over with their families. And I knew the women, I didn't know enough about the culture. I knew the women covered their faces and all that. But it's even more than that. They don't go out any place without their husbands. And to the point, the housing that we found for them were apartments, but had a common area for the wash machines. And that was not acceptable because the wives could not even go over there to do the laundry. So we had to find different apartments that had, wash machines in the unit. And I just had no idea about that. So there were just many, many things to learn about their culture.
Wow, that is very interesting. I've never heard of that also. Mm-hmm. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah. Anyone else? A cultural misunderstanding? Mary? You're muted.
So as a public school elementary school teacher, starting in the 80s, I taught in Walnut, which is, just north of Fullerton, and it's known for being a very ethnic racial community. And many of my students were, their parents had just immigrated. I remember being criticized at a parent-teacher meeting with a father from Taiwan because as a second grade teacher, I wasn't giving his son enough homework. And, you know, I think at the time in the 80s, I thought, you know, this is America, let children have fun.
Was that my dad?
And it was pointed out to me by a wiser person that in Taiwan, at least in the 80s, it was a very competitive situation for advancement. And you wanted your children to start working hard right away, not go outside and play.
That's an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing. It's this one I can totally see like why the father said that, because my father said the same thing to the teacher. Although I was educated in elementary in Thailand, but I went to an international school with an American curriculum, so it was more chill than my friends that were going to a private or a public school in Thailand. They were doing advanced math in second grade. And yeah, I totally understand that. Thank you so much for sharing. Another example of cultural misunderstanding?
Yes.
Yes, Lydia?
When Mary was talking about teaching, then I remember when I taught in Fullerton, and I had a conference with this father. He was Black. And I was saying that his daughter is very wiggly and inattentive, that she needs to learn to pay attention better. Well, he walked away and said, well, it's because I'm Black or she's Black. And you know, the thing is, I treat everyone that way. They need to pay attention, you know, when they're in class.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. So what did you say to the daughter?
Nothing. I just treated her like everyone else. If they are antsy, you know, I, you know, try to calm them down or encourage them to focus.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Perhaps it's not the race thing. Perhaps she might have ADHD.
Well, I thought of that too.
Thank you for sharing. Betty?
So just to add to that, I think part of it is cultural, the way that the children are raised, because when my daughter was in preschool, it was predominantly Caucasian, and they go to the birthday parties and they're hitting the piñata, and the piñata opens and all the kids rush in. And my daughter's standing back. She didn't want to rush in. And I told her, you better go. You're not going to get any candy. And I think just, we're more reserved. I mean, they're running around the restaurant, whatever, we'll tell them to sit down. You can't do that. But maybe other parents are more lenient with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, totally. Parental style, there's a whole research findings on that, right? Like how we bring our culture to parenting. Thank you so much for sharing. Liz?
Sometimes it can be very simple. There was a big nativity scene in my daughter-in-law's mom's living room, and it was fabulous. And I said, well, what happened? There's no baby Jesus. Where's baby Jesus? She looked at me shocked and said, well, he wasn't born yet. They were waiting for Christmas Day to put that little ceramic baby in the nativity scene. And I was just kind of, oh, excuse me, surprised the heck out of me.
Yeah, so you can take that as she's a particular person, right? Yeah, she cares, passionate.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. Anyone else? All right, let's move forward. We do have 20 minutes left, so I might have to skip a couple things. Okay, so the first factor was knowledge factor. Now the motivational factor is how motivated are you in interacting with other people mindfully based on their cultural identity and also, of course, yourself. So let's talk about the first concept, cultural identity. Some people, they feel that they have one identity that speaks out more than the other. Some of my friends, other professors, they feel, they have to advocate for like a certain group of people more than others because that's their passion and that part of their identity speaks out more. For example, I have two Latina friends that are professors. One of them heavily promotes, Latinx causes, march or forms or anything Latinx related, versus my other friend that also is a Latina. She promotes a lot more like women's marches or women's causes. So she feels like strongly with, being a woman and speaking up for women, and less identified as a Latina or less identified as bringing her Latin culture into the emphasis. And I think it's all fine, because at the end of the day, you can't tend to all your identities, right? I have one of my friends is disabled. She has one leg. And even though she's Black and a woman, actually a bisexual woman, there's so many identities to speak up for. You can't do all at once. So she speaks out a lot more about being disabled because she thinks the stage is small. Not enough people advocating for others that have disabilities. So again, cultural identity domain is your domain, is whatever you feel connected with the most. My professor in grad school, he's white American, he's third generation Norwegian, but their family have kept their like Norwegian stuff alive. They celebrate Norwegian holidays. They still have, he speaks Norwegian. So it's really interesting to me that that's what kind of is his cultural identity domain. This was my professor in grad school. He's gay as well, but he didn't, speak up too much about that part of his identity. All that he usually talks about was the Norwegian part. So cultural identity domain is what you find is your domain, your main thing that you go to, the one thing that you feel like represents you the most. And of course, your domain comes with needs. You want people to recognize that part of you, right? If sometimes people forget to recognize one of your domains, you may feel neglected, you may feel misunderstood and not heard, which is not something that we want to strive for. When I was talking about acculturation, which is fitting into a new culture, there's different types of acculturation. There's assimilation, which is you assimilate fully into the majority culture and leave your minority culture. A lot of millennials and Gen Zs are in the assimilation process because a lot of them don't speak the language of their parents. Some I know a lot of my students that are perhaps parents are from Mexico, parents are from China. They don't speak that language anymore. This is due to the fact that they chose to assimilate fully, which is adopting dominant culture. There's integration, which is both adopting and retaining your culture. These can be the people that try to still speak the language, carry on the customs, learn how to cook the original culture's food. So try to integrate, adopt the dominant culture as well as try to retain their their original culture. There's people that feel marginalized. This is when they reject the dominant culture, but also reject their own old culture. Like, well, I can't be that now that I'm here, but then also I don't like the practices and the values of my new culture. So what to do? You just live in agony. You have to choose to integrate or assimilate at some point. Of course, integration being an ideal because then you're able to retain some of your original culture. But when you feel marginalized, a lot of times it's self-work. You have to work into integrating or assimilating to feel like you can fit in and have a happy, healthy relationships with people of your now culture, your current culture. a lot of times I think people that use the term marginalized groups very um, often in ways that it doesn't actually reflect the problem, almost like become a new buzzword to say, doesn't really reflect uh, the actual problem and how to change it. So here, the understanding for all of us, and I want all of us to understand, is there's marginalization, separation, but there's also assimilation and integration. Integration is awesome, right? Then you can live in peace while, you know, integrating, which is adopting stuff of the new culture, retaining yours as well. And research found that immigrants that are able to integrate best live the most satisfying life in their new culture. You no longer feel you're an outsider. You no longer feel like a victim. You just integrate. And integration is great because you retain your culture. You can still speak the language with your family, some friends, cook the same dishes, perhaps invite new people of the new culture to understand your culture. So integration is always the strategy that we teach immigrant kids. While we have another 10 minutes here, I'm going to explain ethnocentrism and then we're going to go to the discussion. Ethnocentrism is the belief that your culture is the best. Ethnocentrism is a belief that your culture is superior than others. So, you know, when people say, oh, Norwegians are the best. Okay, you never hear that. But you say, Norwegians are the best. You know, let's make Norway great again. No, Norwegian is the way to go. Let's all eat salmon and speak Norwegian. That's ethnocentric tendency, saying that you're superior than others and people should just conform. When in fact, there's billions and billions of people in the world. And you can't know that for sure scientifically, that you're the best. And what's a happy life if you consistently think you're better than others, right? So that's ethnocentrism. Consistently thinking, why don't people do this? Why don't people do that? Why do they believe in that? Why do they do this? When you can just kind of think, well, it just is. There's differences, diversity, different practices, different customs, and it just is, and just kind of live peacefully together. If you have, if you know someone, an acquaintance, a friend that perhaps have a little ethnocentric tendency, one of the ways to engage in a conversation with them is to ask, can you point out specifically what is better in this culture than the other? Because a lot of times, people that have high ethnocentric tendencies don't even know the specifics. A lot of times, they just think in high concept terms, like, we're just better. Like, we're just better. Like, what does that mean? You know, I don't know, we're richer. We are happier. We are better looking. Right? Typically, they don't have an argument. It's just like an overall overarching no argument statement. So I sometimes do a friendly challenge by asking, can you tell me like 3 bullet points? Okay, we are going to move forward. We do have 10 minutes. I want us to move forward to the last factor and then our discussion. So the last factor is skill factors. So, okay, now that you learn all of that, people of different cultures, there's diversity, there's high-low context communication, collectivism, individualism, so much information, right? How do we what's the basis of good intercultural relationships with your friends, your romantic partner, your family? It's through mindful observation and listening. A lot of times we're so bad at listening, right? If we would just listen, we would truly understand the problem and collaboratively work together. So mindful observation and listening is first skill that we all can develop to be a better partner, a better friend, a better family member. Observe and listen. The last concept I want to talk about is called mindful stereotyping. Social scientists have come to a conclusion that we cannot not stereotype. It's in our nature to try to understand people based on categories. There's too many characteristics of human beings to understand people individually. A lot of times you have to put them in the box because literally our brain just can't do it. Our brain the first step, what we do when we meet new people is categorization, which is a euphemism for stereotyping. We categorize people based on what we already know, right? Oh, perhaps these people tend to be lazy. These people tend to be homeless. These people tend to work hard. These people take this thing for granted. These people do this. So it's kind of automatic. Therefore, we have to be mindful in are we applying these stereotypes unjustly? So how do we be mindful when we're stereotyping or categorizing? Some of these concepts is, for example, open-ended categories. Just kind of leave it open-ended. Well, I've heard that these people work really hard, but I want to stay open out. Let's see based on merit. Let's see based on what they can do. Another one is the third point, loose interpretations. Okay, well, there's such a stereotype for this group of people being lazy, but you know what? I'm going to keep my loose interpretations and give them a chance and observe based on what they can do. And lastly is willingness to change categories. Like maybe throughout all your life, you've had some conflict with certain culture, right? Perhaps you have observed it with your parents, with your social group, your friends. But if you do encounter new experiences that can change that information, can you change it? Or are you stubborn? Are you saying, no, they're all still the same? No, this group of people, they're not good workers, right? Are you willing to change categories? Are you willing to believe that based on your new experience, that can change? So that's another skill in mindful stereotyping. Now, I know we have a few minutes before we go. I want us to enter a discussion. One of the most commonly said statements about race in America, in the US, is, but I don't see color. I'm a color blind. I don't see color. I just see people. I don't see color. Have you ever heard or used this statement in a conversation? Let's have a little discussion. What do you think it means? I don't see color. I know some of my like in-laws, for example, they said I don't see color. So I had to sit them down and kind of asking them why do they say that, and then try to understand where they're coming from. And a lot of times what I have noticed is people that say this, they don't actually truly know what it means, number one, and number two, they don't have bad intentions, but that's just my personal experience. So Mary, you had your hand up.
Well, I in education, I've heard that very often. And it's upset me because I think it's a lazy way of not acknowledging our multicultural lives in the United States. That kind of I'm a first generation. My parents immigrated from Ireland, so I've always again identified with ethnic groups, and it's just it's a whitewash, and it makes me feel very uncomfortable.
Do you drink a lot? Just kidding. This is not mindful stereotyping.
No, that's what I'm told every St. Patrick's Day. And my parents didn't drink alcohol at all.
Thank you for sharing, Mary. I see Liz's hand.
Yes, I was explaining to someone, had she seen my friend Andrea, and she says, no, describe her. And I'm describing, well, she's this tall and wears glasses and her hair is kind of frosted and everything. And all I had to say was she was black, because that was the only black person there. But in my mind, I didn't see colors. I thought, oh, I'm one of those people who say that. Yeah, so I got confused. All I had to say was she was black, because she was the only black person in the whole area. But I didn't see that. I didn't feel that. I was just explaining what my friend looked like, and she was just here. Didn't you see her?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great example for mindful categorization. So next time you can just say it's the black woman.
Yeah, I don't know why I didn't say that. It was,
Categorization.
yeah, it's because she was not separate from everybody. She was just part of the gang here. So, you know, it just, yeah, it was an eye opener for me. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing.
Okay.
Betty?
So this is interesting because my comment is kind of along the same lines. At work once, there was a photo of a bunch of employees, and they didn't all work on that particular project at that time. And people were trying to identify who was who. And there was one guy, and they were trying to say all kinds of things about him. And I said, the black guy, that's who they're talking about, but they wouldn't say the black guy. I think sometimes people are uncomfortable. And this was, probably 10, 20, probably 20 years ago. People were uncomfortable about saying that. If you're just trying to describe somebody, if, they're tall, they're blonde, or they're black, or, they're Asian. Oh, the thing about confusing people. I had this friend at work who was Asian, I'm Chinese, and we both at that time had the curly hairdos,
Yes.
I'm 5'2", she's about 5'8", and people would get us mixed up all the time.
Oh, but you look the same.
So I asked, somebody said that, and I go, why do people get us confused? And he said, Asian curly hair.
Yeah.
Well, those are the two characteristics that they thought of.
That's interesting. Thank you so much for sharing. And before we go, one more comment, Liz. Is your hand?
No, I'm sorry. I didn't take my hand off.
You just
Okay.
love raising your hand.
Yeah, no, I was fixing my hair.
Thank you so much for sharing. So in conclusion, today we talked about mindful intercultural communication. We understand now that intercultural relationships are inevitable and misunderstandings can always occur, but practice is key. And of course, staying open-minded. I always say practice makes great communication. I myself is in an interracial marriage, and there's so much to learn every single day. Even though I teach this stuff, there can always be misunderstandings. But what I've learned throughout the last 5 years is that staying open-minded before you judge is good, and then practice is key. So thank you so much for attending this session. Again, I'm Tara.
Thank you.
And my email's up here, but I'll also leave it in chat if you'd like to email me for anything. I can also give you the slides if you want to go teach it somewhere else. Feel free to use my slides to teach anywhere. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
You're a lifelong learner.
Thank you very, very much. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us here today. And I'm sure I can speak for everyone that we learned a lot, even though we've seen a lot and we think we know most of this. There was a lot of good information for us. So thank you.
Thank you so much.